Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Dozens of new unions in the South in the last year. You know, I mean, I kind of think of the firefighters as a pretty saturated industry. You know, in terms of unions. You know, most firefighters are already members of the IAFF, but they're finding the ones who aren't and they're organizing them. It's really, really exciting stuff. Looking forward to that conversation. Then in the second half of the program, we're going to be talking to you about the largest meatpacking strike in decades. 4,000 workers in Colorado who are... oh, no sound. Okay, I'm up now. Okay. All right. Appreciate everybody for hanging out with us today. Looking forward to this. Looking forward to the program. We got a great show. This is the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio program and online news outfit in the South. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is. Oh, that's weird. Senator Stutts is saying that he's getting a recording and can't be connected. 844-899-8857. That's weird. Adam, can you take it over? I'm going to give Stutts a call.
Sure, no worries. Yeah, appreciate everybody tuning in this morning. Sorry about some technical difficulties we're having today. But, you know, as we say every week, we are not media professionals. We're just a couple of union brothers who really care about the movement and want to amplify working people's voices. So we've got a big show today. We've got a lot to talk about. I'm really looking forward to overtime. We're going to be talking to folks from the Center for Working Class Politics. And we're going to get into really, you know, how do unions, how do union members, how do union leaders, how can we influence politics in this country more effectively? They've put out a new report titled Unions and Electoral Politics. Can Union Candidates Make a Difference? So I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. And if there are any union candidates in your neck of the woods who are running for office, we'd love to hear about that. Our number is 844-899-TVLR. So I think Stutts may be coming on the show, but... Okay, well, great. I think Senator Stutts may be on the line. No, never mind. So, sorry, guys. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Jeff, if you could, just go ahead and go to break one, and we will take it from there.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. You can give us a call or leave us a voicemail at any time at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We have State Senator Larry Stutts on the line, a Republican from Tuscumbia. Really excited to talk to him because he has had he's been doing a lot of stuff that we have been happy to see over the last few weeks. And so, State Senator Stutts, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes. Thank you for making the time. I appreciate it.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can now. We were getting some feedback for a minute, and I was not sure you were hearing me okay.
Okay. Yes. But you can hear me now? So I appreciate you taking the time.
I can hear you fine now.
Great. So I wanted to start with, because this will probably be a little bit shorter, Huntsville Hospital's acquisition of Crestwood. That is, going to be a huge change in, the implementation of healthcare in Huntsville and in North Alabama. It's going to have a huge effect, I think, on the local economy, on the way that healthcare is administered. And I have just been surprised at how few elected officials have talked about it publicly really in one way or another. You know, I mean, you've not been seeing a bunch of people coming out and saying they're pro the merger, and you've not been seeing a bunch of people coming out and saying they are against the merger. It's been kind of surprising, and so far you are the only elected official that I've seen make any public statements about this, and you have been opposed to it. So can you tell us why you're skeptical that this would be a good deal for North Alabama and Huntsville?
Well, some of the people that are listening may know, but I am a retired physician, and I practiced medicine for 32 years in Northwest Alabama. So I've served on the hospital board. The hospital that I practiced in for those 32 years is now part of the Huntsville Hospital system, and they have brought resources to the area that we otherwise might not have had. But overall, I don't think a monopoly is a good idea. And we have a monopoly in health insurance in Alabama now, with Blue Cross controlling the vast majority of the market, over 90% of the market. And we are seeing consolidation of hospital systems across the state. You know, it should be alarming to everyone, either in healthcare or including everybody that in one way or another receives healthcare, that Ascension Health is the Catholic arm of the Catholic Church that has their healthcare system. And they had hospitals in 47 states, and they sold their 2 hospitals in Alabama, St. Vincent's Hospital in Birmingham and Providence Hospital in Mobile. And so now they're, I guess, in 46 states, and because they could not compete in the Alabama market. And like I said, that should be alarming to everybody. So when we see another hospital kind of just being included in the big conglomerate, I think competition is good. And when one system basically controls all the hospitals in North Alabama, or UAB controls them in Central Alabama, or and Mobile is a little bit more diverse with Mobile Infirmary and the university, and so they don't have hardly the lock on the market. But I'm just not in favor of a monopoly.
Right. Since you have come out in opposition to the merger, has Huntsville Hospital tried to reach out to you to convince you that this would be a good idea?
Yeah, they contacted. They didn't try to convince me. They just said they would, like to talk to me about what I thought about it. And I mean, I'm not laying down in the road to try to stop them from buying it, but again, it doesn't just affect doctors, patients. It affects everybody. It affects the employees. The pay scale for employees in the hospital. If you if you want to work in a hospital and you've only got one hospital you can work at, then we get to set the pay scale. And so it just when you that's why monopolies are generally not a good thing. Is then they control the whole market. And like I said, Huntsville Hospital has done some really good things for the hospital I worked in. They provided some capital resources to buy some equipment that we otherwise might not have been able to buy. I did a lot of robotic surgery, and we had a robot and we got a new one. And so, like I said, we might not have been able to afford that without some capital investment from Huntsville Hospital. So I'm not against Huntsville Hospital. I'm just saying I'm against monopolies in general, whether it be in the insurance market or in the hospital market.
One of the things that defenders of the merger will say is that Huntsville Hospital is on the price side constrained by Medicaid, Medicare, and Blue Cross, and so they can't actually raise prices because of their what will in effect be a monopoly over hospital care in Huntsville. What do you make of that argument?
I agree with it, and I mean, healthcare market is not a totally free market system, you know, because as a consumer, as a patient, you're not as concerned about what your total hospital bill is as you are concerned about how much your deductible is. Or in the case of the federal programs that you mentioned, you know, the federal wage index sets the prices for areas, for states, and Alabama is reimbursed at a lower rate, and then compounded on top of the federal programs where the rate is set that way. Blue Cross has a monopoly on the insurance, and so they set the rates of we're going to pay this, we're going to pay this much per diem, we're going to pay this much for this procedure, whatever. And you look at the reimbursement rates in surrounding states, and they're 30 to 40%, at least that much, 30 to 40% higher in Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi than they are in Alabama.
Wow.
So you wonder why we have a rural healthcare crisis, why doctors don't stay in Alabama to practice. It's because they get paid 30% less in Alabama than they do in the surrounding states. And then you add on top of that Florida and Tennessee don't have a state income tax. And, you know, Mississippi is in the process of phasing their state income tax out. And so, you know, you look at those differences, and when you look at, I'll give you another example if we have another minute or two.
Sure.
There's another hospital in our area that's privately owned. They have hospitals in 17 different states, and they have a hospital in Florence, Alabama, and have one 35 miles away in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. The administration at that hospital will tell you for exactly the same procedure, they are reimbursed more, 30 to 40% more in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee than they are in Florence, Alabama. And one of their administrative people from Nashville told me, here's the difference. He said, there are rural hospitals being sold, closed in other states. He said, we had a rural hospital in Tennessee that was closing, and there were 5 national hospital chains that were bidding on that hospital to take it over. He said, we were one of them, and we did not get it. We got outbid. He said, so rural hospital closing in Tennessee, 5 national chains are trying to buy that hospital. A rural hospital in Alabama is in financial trouble, about to close. And he said there's not a single person that will bid on that hospital. They do not want to be in the Alabama market.
And so you know, it sounds like
problems in healthcare are reimbursement, and reimbursement.
So it sounds like that in your mind, Blue Cross is you know a pretty big problem in Alabama's healthcare system, and I actually just recently learned that Alabama is the most consolidated insurance market in the country. 90%, at least that I saw, 90% of the private insurance in Alabama was Blue Cross. That's no other state has that level of consolidation in the insurance market. Is there anything that the legislature could do to kind of break that up?
I'm not sure but you're exactly right. We're the most consolidated market in the country, and all these things that we keep trying to do, and I talk about this to my colleagues in the legislature that, you know, reimbursement is the issue. You know, we're trying to throw all this money at rural health care in Alabama, and the answer is not more consolidation. The answer is more free market principles to apply. and such things as the certificate of need law, the consolidation of the market. Blue Cross they have told me when I've spoken out on some of these things, that I can't believe you are saying that. We negotiated a contract with you for all 32 years that you were in practice. And I said, you never negotiated a contract with me. You sent me a contract and told me to sign it. In the 32 years I practiced, I never negotiated a contract with them. It was, here's what the contract is, sign it, and if you don't sign it, you're not a Blue Cross provider.
And you mentioned the certificate of needs.
This consolidation of the market is not a good thing for consumers.
Yeah. And another thing that you mentioned was the certificate of needs boards. I wanted to talk about the prison reform, so we're going to have to leave that maybe for another conversation. I've appreciated talking to you about this. Hopefully we can get you back on to talk about it in the future. But on the prisons in Alabama, I think that everybody has, if they've not seen the documentary, they've at least heard of the coverage of it, the Alabama Solution, a documentary about kind of what's going on inside of Alabama's prisons. And, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that documentary and kind of the response to it was a big driver for you to put forward some prison reform legislation. Now, I also understand that legislation has been kind of tabled for this session, and it might be revisited in future sessions, but a large portion of what you put forward is actually going to be adopted now by the Department of Corrections. Can you tell us about the legislation that you put forward, what the new reforms are going to be that are going to be taken up by the Department of Corrections, and what was it that motivated you to put that forward?
Well, first, we can all agree before the movie came out, we knew that we had overcrowding issues, we had violence issues in the Department of Corrections. And I commend the Department of Corrections for meeting with me and talking to me, but I'll tell you, it didn't happen until after I filed the bill. And so we've had several very productive meetings and have agreed without legislation right now to look at 3 or 4 prisons, Tutwiler Prison, and then either 2 or 3 men's prisons, and institute the things as a pilot program and institute it now, over the next few weeks, in these 3 or 4 prisons, and then come back in a year and look at what the needs are. Because the bill, it would have mandated that they institute these measures across the entire system, and that might be too much to bite off. And the Examiner of Public Accounts is who in my bill would have been overseeing this evaluation of the Department of Corrections. And the principle there is it's never a good idea for all the evaluation to evaluate yourself. It's hard to objectively evaluate oneself. So they've agreed to institute these checks and balances and an outside review of what they do in the Department of Corrections, because it's not just the movie. If you look at the statistics, Alabama has the highest inmate mortality rate in the United States. Our inmate homicide rate is 6 times the national average. So the violence in our prisons and the contraband and all the things that go on, the smuggling drugs in, the smuggling cell phones into the prison. You ask, how in the world does that happen? You've got a 10-foot fence around the prison and checkpoints, and how do people get drugs in? Well, corrections officers smuggle them in. They drop them in with drones. There are just but then the overcrowding, the lack of rehabilitation, I mean, all those things contribute to the violence, the frustration, the anger that's present inside the prisons.
Right.
You know, one of the ladies that testified at our public hearing had been an inmate at Tutwiler at the women's prison, and she said that they went for 4 weeks without toilet paper or feminine hygiene products in a women's prison.
Yeah.
I mean, those kind of things. I mean, prisons are made to. I mean, they're there for 3 reasons: to protect the rest of society, to punish the people that are there, but to also to rehabilitate
Right.
them. And because the statistic is about 92% of the people that are in prison are eventually going to be out.
Right.
And so what kind of citizens are they going to be when they get turned out? And the system currently makes them more violent, more angry, and turns them out with very, very limited resources and say, now go get a job and don't come back. But we haven't prepared them for life on the outside.
Senator Stutts, you're sounding
we just made them more angry and more violent while they were there.
Exactly. I mean, it's all of this seems to me to be really such common sense stuff, but there are people in your party that seem to be trying to push back against this, and if not directly against your oversight reform or any, I've never seen any refutation of any specific allegation in the Alabama solution or any of these testimonies generally about the state of Alabama's prisons, but there's just kind of a general sense that, they did a crime and that's basically what they deserve. I mean, I know that I believe that you've watched the film, and so you've seen the talk radio being featured in the film where they were like, do the crime, do the time. We don't really care what's going on in there, basically. Michael Yaffe, in describing the film, said it was biased, made by smuggling contraband cell phones to convicted felons, which is technically true, but, is it true? Is what the documentary saying true? Steve Marshall saying it's a propaganda documentary. Why do folks like that seem to be kind of unwilling to engage with the issue in the same way that you are?
Well, I can't really speak for them, but we do have some mentality of, well, if you don't want to be in prison, don't commit the crime. But, the fact is, that's not the whole purpose of the prison system. And I just think we have a moral obligation to, if you're a ward of the state, we have a moral obligation to treat you humanely. And that's not what goes on currently in the Department of Corrections. And I want some outside oversight. Another bill, I know we're getting short on time, but another bill that I introduced was for the Department of Public Health to inspect the food services in the prison system. And the overwhelming response that I've heard from people after I filed that bill is, you mean they don't already do that? And the answer is no, they don't. They had the authority to inspect it, but didn't have any enforcement provisions. All they did was give a report to the warden. And again, back to Tutwiler, I had somebody that was at Tutwiler that told me that they went for several months without hot water in the kitchen at Tutwiler. That's inexcusable.
Right.
And so there are just problems that have to be addressed. And I think you need some outside eyes to look at those problems and objectively say, we've got to fix this. And so the department has been very open to, I've met with them now 4 times to talk about how we're going to institute these things. And there are good people working there that want to fix the problem, but we've got to overcome the inertia of the current system that just says, well, you're locked up, you need to stay there.
State Senator Larry Stutts, Republican from Tuscumbia, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope we can get you on again.
Well, thank you very much.
In his op-ed announcing his reform legislation, he quoted the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 3, "Continue to remember those in prison as if you were together with them in prison." I think that we could do to remember that. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Used to you, I'll tell how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We just finished a conversation with Alabama State Senator Larry Stutts about health care and prison reform in the state. We are about to be talking to the Deputy Director of Organizing for the International Association of Firefighters. If you missed anything, you can find it on YouTube and Facebook at the Valley Labor Report. All that and more on today's program. If you'd like to call in, the phone number, the lines are open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also send us a note at tvlr.fm/contact. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, you should get your local, district council, or international to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we do want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, WMSP, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out at laborradionetwork.org. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
Every week in the South, workers organize new unions, they bargain new contracts, they fight for good legislation and against bad legislation, and they put the boss in their place. This is Last Week in Southern Labor. Last week in the South, 87 workers across 8 bargaining units unionized, 27 workers across 2 bargaining units voted against unionization, 593 workers across 5 bargaining units withdrew their petition for a union election, 122 workers in 2 bargaining units decertified their unions, 74 workers in 1 bargaining unit voted against decertifying their union, and 181 workers in 5 bargaining units have gone public with their union campaigns. Here are the details. 51 workers at Olin Winchester in Independence, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 6 workers at Volunteer Energy Cooperative in Decatur, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 175. 58 workers at Bull Moose Tube Company in Gerald, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 688. 61 workers at Willow Creek Wellness and Rehabilitation in Florissant, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the SEIU Healthcare, Missouri, Kansas, and 5 workers at MEMC Logistics Department in St. Peters, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the IAMAW District 9. In campaign updates, the United Video Game Workers, UVW-CWA, a direct join union for video game industry workers, just hit 550 dues-paying members after going public last year. The union is committed to building large-scale education campaigns about labor organizing in the video game industry, providing legal support and layoff support funds for workers, and more. In election results, 12 workers at the Fort Worth Report in Fort Worth, Texas, voted 11 to 1 in favor of unionization with the News Guild, CWA Local 39-13, despite the employer hiring an anti-union consultant. 15 workers at Starbucks in Prospect, Kentucky, voted 1-5 against unionization with Starbucks Workers United, as did 12 workers at a location in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, voting 5-6 against unionization. 15 workers at TDS Broadband Service LLC in Mooresville, North Carolina, voted 10-3 in favor of unionization with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. 74 workers at Silgan Containers Manufacturing in St. Joseph, Missouri, voted 46-24 against decertifying the sheet metal, air, rail, and transportation workers. SMART Local 2. The union stays. 10 workers at Big Sandy Rural Electric Cooperative Corporation in Paintsville, Kentucky, voted 6-0 in favor of unionization with IBEW Local 317. 115 workers at Windstream, North Carolina in Rural Hall, North Carolina, voted 50-61 in favor of decertifying the CWA, and 7 workers at Tricont Trucking Company in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, voted 7-0 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 769. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, workers who care for our nation's veterans have their union rights back for now. A federal judge ruled that the contract that the Department of Veterans Affairs signed with the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, must be immediately reinstated, granting the union a preliminary injunction while the case plays out. The judge found that the revocation of the contract was likely a violation of the First Amendment and the Administrative Procedures Act. The decision immediately impacts more than 320,000 workers. Unions are demanding that the Trump administration stand up for working people and end corporate consolidation. In entertainment, the Teamsters Union is calling on the Department of Justice to block the merger between Paramount Skydance and Warner Brothers Discovery. In their statement, they say that this merger poses, quote, a direct threat to film and television workers. They point to Disney's 2019 acquisition of 20th Century Fox, saying that merger, quote, resulted in eliminated production units, significant job losses, and canceled projects. In the news industry, the Communication Workers of America, CWA, condemned the Trump's FCC for allowing Nexstar and Tegna to merge. They say that long-standing ownership limits have been crucial to protecting a free and competitive media market, but allowing these local news industry giants to merge now creates one single entity with access to 80% of U.S. households. The union, as a shareholder in the company, announced that it would be pursuing governance reforms to protect workers and the public. In strikes and bargaining updates, 500 workers at Genesis Logistics in Stafford, Virginia, organized with the Teamsters Local 322, just ratified their first union contract after unionizing last year. The workers make commercial deliveries to 7-Eleven stores. The union said the contract includes higher pay, more paid time off, and improved working conditions. Flight service workers for Leidos in Ashburn, Virginia, and Fort Worth, Texas, just ratified a new collective bargaining agreement. The workers, who are organized with the International Association of Machinists, IAM, Locals 2010 and 2011, secured wage increases, increased employer retirement contributions, more paid leave, increased shift premiums, and more. In political and legislative updates, Trump wants to bring CEO pay down. No, not for all CEOs who at most large companies in the U.S. make nearly 300 times more than their average worker, but at the Tennessee Valley Authority, the largest public utility company in the country. In a presidential memorandum, he encouraged the TVA to limit the compensation of all of its employees to no more than $500,000, in particular targeting the CEO Don Mole, who makes $6.4 million annually. While probably not a bad policy, it's notable that Trump's ire at CEO pay only extends to the TVA CEO and not to the billionaires who supported his campaign and continued to prop up his presidency. For some context, the TVA's CEO makes about 34 times the median workers' compensation. Elon Musk, a huge donor to Trump and booster on social media, makes thousands of times what the average Tesla worker makes. It seems like Trump's priorities might be a little misplaced. Texas firefighters are fighting for collective bargaining rights. The College Station Professional Firefighters Association is pushing for a referendum on civil service protection and the right to collectively bargain for firefighters. In a statement about the referendum, the union said that this will not increase taxes on local residents. In their own statement about the referendum push, the city said that they only recently learned of the campaign and that they will, quote, carefully consider how these potential changes could affect citizens and workers, but stopped short of opposing the measure. So far, no union in the United States has been supportive of the war in Iran. Many unions came out quickly with statements condemning the war. The United Electrical Workers, UE, the National Nurses United, NNU, the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, among others. Following several affiliates speaking out against the war, the AFL-CIO, the nation's largest union federation with 65 affiliates and millions of members, also issued a statement opposing the war, demanding, quote, an end to the conflict, respect for international law, a renewed commitment to nuclear disarmament, and full respect for freedom of association. If we missed anything, let us know about your union updates at tvlr.fm/contact. We have on the line now Neil Pettit, Deputy Director of Organizing for the International Association of Firefighters, IAFF. Neil, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Hey, thanks so much for the invite, Jacob. Look forward to the conversation.
Really do appreciate you taking the time, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for about a month now when I saw a copy of a presentation that you gave at a Southern Labor Research table, and really excited to talk to you about it. But before we dive into what the Firefighters Union has been doing in the South in particular, can you talk to us a little bit about yourself? What made you decide to work in the labor movement? Why is that important to you?
Sure. Appreciate the question. So I actually myself was not a firefighter. I did sign my first union card when I was 18 years old. I was a fourth generation Teamster member. Was a rank and file member for a little over 4 years while driving a forklift at the same logistics company as my father drove a truck at. And my mother was also a union meat wrapper as well. As far as why is it important, everyone has that watershed moment they look back on. And I remember clear as day when I was 19 years old, working at the trucking company, we heard reports that from supervisors that management was looking to cut our hours on our shift and reduce work hours. Instead of filing a grievance, which could take a while to resolve, I was able to organize my coworkers to march on the boss the next shift. So 15 of us, who some of my coworkers are usually late to work, they actually showed up early the next day and marched through the dispatch office straight into the manager's office and voiced our concerns and packed the room. And our hours were never cut. They remained the same. That victory was really deeply felt among all my coworkers, and it's really when I realized it's something I wanted to do for a living.
That's a great story. I love being able to kind of I love stories like that where workers are able to kind of circumvent some of the legalistic process and just get right to the point and get what they're fighting for. That's really exciting. And I think that you may have some of those stories about what the union has been, what the IFF has been doing in the South. And so let's talk about that. Can you give us some of the highlights of how the Firefighters Union has had some really exciting organizing successes over the last couple of years, particularly in the South?
Yeah. So in 2024, which is the first year I started at the IFF, we organized a total of 70 new locals across the union and grew by 9,604 members. Last year, we organized 88 new locals and departments and grew by over 10,074 new members net. And so far this year, we've organized 19 new locals and departments, and our goal is to hit 100 by the end of the year. As of March, we're at a total of 364,143 union members, and we just broke 3,600 locals. We're now at 3,601 as of March.
Wow. I mean, that's really, I mean, that's incredible. Being able to organize that many new members over the last couple of years. How has the union been able to do that?
Yeah, I think our emphasis on the South, we look at our overall density, and we calculate our national industry density in the United States on a monthly basis. And what that means is we compare our total active membership with the total number of career firefighters. And depending on the source, it provides slightly varying numbers. For example, the U.S. Fire Administration data in 2024, when I started, we held approximately 77.1% national industry density, and we've been able to increase that. And as of March 2026, we've increased it by 4.3% to 81.4% national industry density. Now, as of, if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2024, the IAFF held 84.8% and has now grown in 2025 to 87.5%. And we really focus on, where our lower density, states are, and especially emphasize on organizing there and everywhere.
And one of the things that you said that the union has tried to prioritize is the number of elections rather than the win rate. Can you talk, I have some thoughts about the way that unions have been approaching the organizing question and whether or not to take campaigns to elections, but why does the IAFF have that focus on, just going out and trying to give workers an opportunity to have an election wherever possible rather than, being so kind of tightly controlled to get a super high win rate?
Yeah, there is a statistic I just want everyone to know about that really blew my mind when I first heard it. So the NLRB publishes annual election reports going back to the beginning, and it shows all private sector representation elections, throughout the United States each year. So in 2024, fiscal year 2024, there were a total of 1,788 R-case elections. Unions won 73% of those. So that comes out to about 1,300 organizing victories that unions won. If you look in 1971, there were 8,362 elections. And unions only achieved 53% win rate, but the total number of victories was 4,432. So that's over 3,000 more union victories by winning only a little over half of the elections.
Wow. And that, yeah, I mean, I think that why do you think it is that the labor movement kind of writ large has been willing to play it a little bit more safe when we played it less safe and we took more chances that we actually got a greater number of total members?
Yeah, I guess as a union staffer myself, it's always nice to report on high win rate. But you could, by doing that, you're leaving money on the table, so to speak. You're leaving members, who could be a part, not run an election.
And you mentioned that you were a union staffer, and that's another thing that you mentioned in your presentation about how it's really difficult to run a high number of union campaigns if you are totally reliant on union staff to be the driver of these campaigns. And so the firefighters union has a more worker-to-worker model of building new unions. Can you talk a little bit about what is that and what does it look like on the ground?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I'm the only dedicated full-time organizing staff person in the entire union. So simply put, we don't rely upon
Wow.
organizing staffers like me to run organizing campaigns. It would be, impossible to win 88 elections last year, relying upon a staffer. So at the IFF, organizing is actually under the purview of our 16 district vice presidents, and each of them represent thousands of members across various states or provinces. So most of our leads come through the IAFF.org website. The join button is centrally located right on the landing page, and there's a simple form asking for basic information, and then we follow up to get more details on what's going on. So if somebody wants to join, they just go to the IAFF.org, fill out the form, and then we reach out to them as soon as we can. Then when a lead from a non-union department reaches out and we get the necessary information, we hand it off to the district vice president, who assesses the viability, knows the local and state politics the best. And depending on the region, sometimes they'll assign one of their district field service representatives to reach out and help, which is usually an active union firefighter in that area to assist that new local. And then sometimes the DVP will reach out themselves as well. When a campaign is viable, we will ship out an organizing kit, which is a small box of materials, and either directly to the local contact or whoever from the IFF is helping them. And this kit has everything they need to charter as a local union with the IAFF. So we give them all the tools they need, and it's up to that new local to get the membership cards and the dues, first month's dues collected. They vote on their dues rate. They create their local constitution and bylaws and all that themselves.
With the special emphasis on organizing in the South, you're organizing obviously in a lot of places where public sector workers, which most firefighters are public sector workers, don't have collective bargaining rights. But, obviously it's the position of the union that workers can still win a lot, even if they don't have these rights set in stone. What are some of the things that workers can win? And maybe you can give us some examples of that where they don't have collective bargaining rights.
Yeah, so we do not allow the law to dictate when we are not a union. That's the first thing is organizing together as a union. If we don't organize in states without collective bargaining rights, then firefighters have no way to advocate for their profession and their community. So in states without collective bargaining rights, getting involved in politics on both the state and local level is extremely important. And basically every issue is a separate issue fight. Our state associations are extremely important in those non-collective bargaining states so we can pass statewide legislation to support our members. There's one example that I'll give is in September 2025, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Local 820 in Tennessee, they don't have collective bargaining rights. They won 32 to 37% across the board wage increases for their members. And speaking to President Jack Thompson there, it's about advocating for public safety with your local officials. Fair pay is the only way to recruit and retain qualified firefighters. And this raise is a big step forward in protecting the public.
And even in places without collective bargaining rights, the firefighters union is making strides towards getting those collective bargaining rights. I mean, just last week, we mentioned this in our kind of roundup segment. Firefighters in Texas, in College Station, Texas, are trying to get a referendum on the ballot locally to give firefighters civil service protections and the right to collectively bargain. So, there's a piece of it that's, like you said, we don't allow the law to dictate when we're a union and when we're not a union. We decide when we're a union, and we're going to fight to make things better for firefighters and working people at the municipality. But also, it's not, the firefighters union doesn't just take it as given that the law is what it is and it's never going to change, right?
Yeah, that can change depending on who's in office. We don't have permanent enemies or permanent friends. And you just find those, who support your efforts. You mentioned Texas, and I think Texas is a great example of a southern state where they don't have statewide collective bargaining rights. It's deferred to the local level. And we do a lot of organizing in Texas. In 2024, 8 new locals organized with the IAFF, and then last year in 2025, 9 new locals organized. This year so far, we've already organized 2 new locals in Texas. Our 11th district there is very, very busy in organizing. That's the first step, is organizing a local. The next step is, as you kind of talked about, is running a ballot proposal effort where the voters in that local or municipality have to approve collective bargaining for firefighters. And there's been some big ones recently. I think last year, I just saw the president out of Irving, Texas, Local 2073, and they just agreed to their first ever collective bargaining agreement.
That's, just really, really exciting stuff. And if I'm remembering correctly, you said that was there a path to collective bargaining somewhere in Alabama?
Yeah, I believe we do have, some statewide legislation that allows for that path, but we even have in some states where it's silent. That just means it's an opportunity to push for local collective bargaining. I'll give an example is I think you all reported on in Jackson, Mississippi, our local there, that just for the first time in 20 years agreed to won a collective bargaining agreement. There's a number of states, even in like for example, Virginia, where in Virginia right now, collective bargaining for public employees is a local issue that has to be approved by, I believe, the city council or county. And we currently have, I think, 8 contracts throughout Virginia, but we have a new bill that was just passed by the legislature and is heading to Governor Spanberger's desk, expected to be signed, that provides for statewide collective bargaining rights in Virginia for over 500,000 public employees, including firefighters.
That's incredible. I mean, that's really, really exciting. And another thing that y'all have done recently is in Utah. There were some people in the legislature that tried to take collective bargaining rights backwards, that tried to revoke collective bargaining rights from all public sector employees. And the firefighters worked together with other public sector employee unions to repeal that rescission of collective bargaining rights. Can you talk to us about that and how the firefighters in Utah work together with the public sector unions there?
Absolutely. So back in February of 2025, the state legislature passed and Governor Cox signed a bill that stripped all collective bargaining rights from public employees. And we had firefighters pack the galleries when that was being voted on, debated, and passed. After that happened, 18 Utah labor unions, including our state association, the Professional Firefighters of Utah, came together and they created I think it was the Protect Utah Workers Coalition. In just 30 days, they collected 320,000 signatures, which is more than double what was required to run a ballot referendum challenging this anti-collective bargaining bill. And it would have been on the November 2026 ballot. And it was actually the largest signature collection campaign in Utah's history.
Wow.
In December of 2025, this even forced Governor Cox to call a special session, which was called to address this issue. and it resulted in an overwhelming bipartisan support to repeal the original anti-collective bargaining law. Public employees, including firefighters, they won back their collective bargaining rights.
Neil Pettit is the Deputy Director of Organizing for the International Association of Firefighters. Neil, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Is there, I guess the last thing that I wanted to ask you about is once workers and firefighters in this instance have a union, I mean, that's not, and even if they have the collective bargaining agreement, that's not the end of it, right? I mean, the union needs members to not only pay dues, that's kind of the minimum thing. The union needs people to be active in their unions, go to the meetings, participate in their campaigns, and help build power for firefighters and for working people to make things better, right? I mean, you can't just say, I've got a union now and I'm done. The union needs people to be active participants, right?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan in, especially emphasizing, those local issues that motivate people, to get more involved. I'll give another Chattanooga example is in 2024, we organized the Chattanooga Industrial Automotive Firefighters Local Union, I-104, and they're the firefighters in the Volkswagen plant. They won their election through the NLRB with a 100% yes vote. Their local president, Chris Pinnell, negotiated their first contract, which included 27% in wage increases over 3 years, 5-year minimum 5-person minimum staffing, a just cause system that even includes time limits for the company to issue discipline. But, the fight's never over. They're fighting for a new, safe, mold-free fire station or living quarters. So you just got to continue to find those issues and continue to take those victories, claim victory and move on to the next issue like they are.
Neil, is there anything else that you wanted to talk to us about before we let you go?
No, I really appreciate it. Looking forward to coming back and reporting more on our organizing in the South. Just this year, we've already organized 2 new locals in South Carolina, 1 in North Carolina. And like I said, our goal is 100 by the end of the year. So we'll see.
Really excited. We'll keep in touch. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jacob.
We're going to take a break, folks. We'll be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Appreciate everybody tuning in. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a written comment at tvlr.fm/contact. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Got some more good stuff coming up for you later in the program. The state's largest water utility is working on, or it has fired a bunch of workers, almost 200 is my understanding now. And they've also last week took fluoride out of the water as a cost-saving measure, they say. Adam, what's going on down there?
Yeah, so I haven't been following this story as closely as some other folks down in the Birmingham area, obviously, but a couple weeks ago, we got word that the Central Alabama Water Works, as they're now called, is actually, or did lay off well over 100 folks. They laid them off via text message, and I guess I shouldn't say laid off. They were fired, right? They were fired. They were terminated via text message. And there's been a really, fierce community pushback against this. As you mentioned, Jacob, they are dealing with some budget issues, allegedly, and, they have announced they're going to stop putting fluoride in the water. That has received a lot of criticism as well. I saw Birmingham Mayor Randall Woodfin had a very strong statement in the last day or so about that. But yeah, there's some interesting dynamics here because there's some racial dynamics at play. It's interesting to note that majority of the workers who are being impacted here are black. The management is majority white. And so there are some, racial concerns that have been brought up among some folks who have been protesting this. There have been protests already. The latest one was yesterday, Friday. I know folks from the community, some of the fired workers, local union folks, they showed up and were at the board meeting yesterday. As my understanding is they were locked out, but I know that workers are working with the Southern Workers Assembly, and there is a petition out if folks want to do that. Stand with Central Alabama Water Workers. If you just Google that with Southern Workers Assembly, you should find that if you want to sign the petition and get plugged in and kind of stay in the loop. There is going to be a mass meeting on Monday night So that would be the 23rd. It's going to be at 6:30 p.m. Birmingham Waterworks Employees United. They are going to be meeting at the Movement Fellowship Church. That's on Pratt Highway there in Birmingham, demanding justice, reinstatement, and accountability. Just to mention a couple more things, they have been reporting a hostile work environment for some time now, well before these latest terminations. And there's also a lot of concerns about the waterworks in terms of their water services. My understanding is they are losing about half of the water due to leaks and other issues. And so that was something Randall Woodfin, the mayor, pointed out in his statement, was like, seems like you've got issues to deal with internally beyond canceling fluoride and firing a bunch of workers, right? And so there's also, issues in terms of oversight. I'm not well read on all the legislation that has happened over the last few years that has transformed the Waterworks Board and kind of changed the governance structure and accountability structure. But what I do know as a unionist is that I stand in solidarity with any workers who are being mistreated. And there's a real opportunity here for the community and for the labor movement and for all of us across the state, as well as, similarly situated workers across the South. This is a big opportunity for us to organize and support these workers. And I would encourage anyone who's listening who is impacted or who knows folks who are impacted. I know we have some folks in the Birmingham area who listen. So I would encourage folks to get involved, and I would encourage the Waterworks employees to be building their committee. Hopefully by now there is a strong organizing committee in place, and they are having these one-on-one conversations across the staff and starting to build their demands. We have a long history in this country of public sector or quasi-public sector type workers, folks in the public services who maintain our utilities, maintain our trash services, etc. We have a long history of militancy with workers like that. I know one of the earliest instances of public sector workers actually winning a union contract was in Philadelphia, when the garbage truck workers actually went on strike. And at the time, what they went on strike for was actually pretty similar to this. There was a mass firing, and the workers organized. They went on strike to demand reinstatement of all the fired workers, as well as union recognition. So there is a history. There is a precedent for workers in these kind of situations being able to come together, build their power, and win people's jobs back, win formal recognition of the union. And I think that is what I would like to see. I would like to see the Waterworks Administration recognize these workers, sit down at the table, bring these workers back, and sign a fair contract. So again, you can go online to the Southern Workers Assembly. They're working with some of these folks. I know there are other unions in the Birmingham area who are helping out with these folks, but there is a petition, Stand with Central Alabama Waterworkers. And again, there's a meeting Monday night in Birmingham for those who want to check that out.
Yeah. Every week, every day across the South, workers are killed on the job, stolen from, discriminated against, or sexually harassed, and sometimes the employers are caught. This is Boss Watch. In Florida last week, the U.S. Department of Labor cited a Florida utility construction contractor for Duke Energy after one worker was electrocuted and two others were injured at a Seminole site in August of 2025. Investigators with the Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, determined a work crew from Primoris Services Corporation, operating as Primoris T&D Services, LLC, was replacing a utility pole when the pole contacted an energized overhead transmission line, fatally electrocuting a lineman and sending two other workers to the hospital. OSHA cited the employer with 3 serious violations for failing to ensure employees maintained the required minimum approach distance from exposed energized parts or have the transmission line de-energized. They also failed to assign a designated observer to monitor approach distances and provide warnings, and they failed to ensure that the job briefing covered special precautions required when working under energized transmission lines. OSHA proposed about $50,000 in penalties. The employer has contested the citations before the Independent Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. Penalties and citations may be adjusted throughout the course of the case process. Over in Virginia, Epic Food Hall in Woodbridge, which owned and operated a food hall in Woodbridge, Virginia, will pay $54,000 and provide other relief to settle a racial harassment lawsuit filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. According to the lawsuit, Epic's black general manager faced racial harassment from the company's owner, who frequently made derogatory comments about black customers and employees, calling them, quote, ignorant, ghetto, and riffraff. The owner also told the general manager that he, quote, looked like he spoke thug language, end quote, and referred to him using the N-word, the EEOC alleged. Tired of the owner's harassment and without any avenue to file a report, the general manager resigned in January 2023 after 6 months of employment. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. The 3-year consent decree consent decree settling the lawsuit provides for $54,000 to the former general manager. As represented in the decree, Epic no longer has any operating businesses or employees. In addition to the monetary relief, the decree states that should Epic resume business operations, it shall be enjoined from creating or maintaining a hostile work environment on the basis of race. It will create and distribute an anti-harassment policy and provide Title VII training to its owners and management. We got about 10 minutes left in the first half of the program. Make sure you find us on Facebook and YouTube to watch the second half of the program. We'll be talking to Jared Abbott from the Center for Working Class Politics about the decline of union influence in electoral politics over the last 40 or 50 years and what unions can do to turn that around. Really excited for this conversation. Lots of stuff to talk about. But before we do that, we got a couple of other things to get to in the first half of the program. Adam, you wanted to talk about the No Kings protest that's going to be going on next week?
Yeah, that's right. On March 28th, there's going to be a lot of folks gathering again with allies at events across the country to make it clear that America does not belong to greedy billionaires or those who govern through fear. It belongs to the people. The wealth hoarders are pushing hard to dismantle union contracts, gut worker protections, and stop future workers from ever having a voice in their pay, benefits, or retirement. While working people struggle with skyrocketing gas, food, and medical costs, billionaires are raking in record profits through tax breaks and other schemes. So a lot of folks are going to be gathering on March 28th for the No Kings actions. Because we deserve strong union contracts and protections and affordable health care and retirement and feeling safe in our communities, right? We want to fix our tax system so that, it's not burdening poor and working people while rich folks and the corporations get rewarded. So there's going to be a lot of actions across the state of Alabama, across the South. I would encourage anyone who's available to check into it. Now, I know there's, some concerns or criticism of the No Kings actions that comes from various directions, and those are interesting and, worth discussing. But I do think it's pretty remarkable that even in small towns like Fort Payne or Jacksonville or Athens, Alabama, that there's going to be some actions. I think it's important to get people out in community and get to know each other. And, for me, I will be participating in the Montgomery action on March 28th at the invitation of the Poor People's Campaign, because, if the Poor People's Campaign asks me to do something, I'm probably going to be there because I stand in solidarity with them and appreciate what they're doing. I am a father, a husband, lifelong Southerner, and I'm proud to be a union man. And in the labor movement, we have this old saying that an injury to one is an injury to all. Some of us really do believe that, which is why I'm going to be there next Saturday. Our state's leaders love to talk about how great we are for business, but we don't talk enough about the workers who face some of the worst conditions in the entire developed world. Oxfam recently released a list of best states to work in, and you'll be shocked to learn that Alabama ranked number 50. That ain't right. It could be better. It should be better. I don't know about y'all, but I'm tired of Alabama being at the bottom of everything good and at the top of everything bad. It has to be better. A better Alabama is possible, but only if we come together and fight for it. We're going to need a lot of people power. But when we look back at our history, we see that it's always taken people power to win positive changes. Labor rights were not simply given to us. They were not easily handed out. Like civil rights, women's rights, all of our human rights, it took everyday people organizing to make these rights. So if we're to win the kind of state we deserve, if we're to win a future we can believe in, we need a mass movement of everyday people uniting the working class majority, defeating bigotry through solidarity, and taking on the big money interests that have so dominated our state. The kind of people power we haven't seen in generations. A mass movement rooted in love and justice that can fight back against the forces of greed, poisoning everything from our politics to our planet. I wish I could say that it will be easy, but the truth is building worker power in Alabama is a complicated, difficult project. But never has this work been more important or more urgent. We are living in the most economically unequal time in modern history, with multiple layers of crisis bearing down upon us. A time when so few have so much, while so many are scratching to survive. We're in the richest country in the history of the world, yet hundreds die each day from poverty, and too many of our so-called leaders would rather bomb children than feed them. Now more than ever, we need a stronger labor movement that can help defend our families, our freedoms, and our security. If not now, then when? If not us, then who? In this moment in history, poor and working people and people of goodwill everywhere are called to work together across our differences, to bring more and more of us together around our common interests, because when we do that, we can do amazing things. I believe we can transform this state. We can organize and we can win living wages and paid leave and a voice on the job and better health care and a dignified retirement and safer workplaces and safer communities. We can organize and we can expand public services for the public good. We can fix our broken criminal justice system. We can finally uplift the least of these. We can choose peace over war, jobs over jails, kids over corporations, people over profits, need over greed. We can do all that and more when we build a mass movement big enough, diverse enough, and strong enough to challenge the powers that be and shake up this Southern status quo. So organize your workplace, organize your campus, organize your church, organize your neighborhood, organize your family. We need all hands on deck. With your help, we can grow the people power it's going to take to win the better Alabama and the better world that's not only possible, but necessary. So see you on March 28th. Solidarity forever, y'all.
And that's going to be it for the first half of the program for us. Like I said, we got a really great second half of the show for you. We're going to be talking to Jared Abbott of the Center for Working Class Politics about their recent report on the decline of union influence in elections and how unions can get it back. We're also going to be talking about the first meatpacking or the first strike at the Greeley, Colorado beef processing facility in the plant's 40-year history. Never had a strike until now. 4,000 Colorado workers are on strike against the plant members of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 7. Really important issue. So, and then I also think that we're going to probably be talking a little bit about the news around Cesar Chavez. I mean, just really, difficult to know what to say about it. It's so just so gross. But if you have read even just a little bit beyond kind of the top lines about Cesar Chavez, you know that he wasn't great. There's a lot of problem. He was a very problematic figure. So we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. 844-899-8857 is the phone number. Would love to take your calls in the second half of the program. You can also leave us a voicemail at any time if you're not catching us live. You can send us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. And please do try to get your locals to sponsor the show, folks. We're on the radio, 5 stations across the South now, and we're looking at some really exciting expansions here in the next couple of months. So, takes money to do that. So if you could try to get your unions to sponsor the program, we would appreciate it. You can reach out to us, tvlr.fm/contact. To do that as well. And you can donate yourself at tvlr.fm/donate. If you don't find us online, we'll see you next week. Appreciate your time. Talk to you later. All right. We're off the radio now. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail or give us a call, the phone number is 844-899-8857. That is 844-899-TVLR. You can also send us a written note at tvlr.fm/contact. Maybe we can talk about this, the Cesar Chavez stuff at the top, because I don't think we have just a whole lot to say about it. I mean, obviously it's terrible. For those of you who don't know, the New York Times came out with some reporting about how Cesar Chavez had sexually harassed and raped women and girls in the movement, including Dolores Huerta. Just terrible allegations or things that have been, more or less proven, as much as you can prove those things without a criminal trial at this point. And obviously so disappointing, because there are so many places and events that have been over the country dedicated to commemorating the fight for rights for farm workers are named after him. And so this is impacting a lot of people, and is just really, really disappointing. In the chat, Steve mentions a book called Solidarity Betrayed: How Unions Enable Sexual Harassment and How They Can Do Better. And that might be something that folks want to check out. I said, I took a labor law class with the author. She worked for the NLRB, the AFL-CIO, and others. And, Adam, you were talking about how, if you have read, most people in the movement know, I don't think very many people knew about this, but they knew about a lot of bad things about Cesar Chavez. He was very anti-immigrant at multiple times during his career, very undemocratic, led the movement in a very kind of culty way. And, we were talking before the show about how this is, I think this kind of makes the case for unions and institutions more generally that are more open and more democratic than not, because when an institution is more open, is more democratic, has more accountability, then there is less opportunity for stuff like this to happen, and then when it happens, there's less opportunity for it to be covered up and for the perpetrators to be protected, because more people will know about it. And more people will want to do something about it.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to say it's all just about the democracy aspect, because we have to wrestle with the misogyny and the sexism and the other forms of bigotry that are present among folks that are supposed to be on our side, right? And I think we have to be careful not to assume that folks' morality and their politics are always the same. Or that folks that are theoretically on our side somehow share our morality. But I do think there is an issue in a lot of organizations, unions included, where a lack of democracy and a top-down structure enables people who are abusive. And, so that's something we have to deal with, and I think we have to guard against, because there's always going to be folks who, once they have some power, want to keep it and want to use it and abuse it for their own purposes. And I think that's something we have to be on guard against in our movement. And we have, I think, a special responsibility to defend folks and to call people out who are abusive. We have to take action. We have to look out for our sisters and brothers who are victims. And I think it's it's tempting sometimes to put people on a pedestal. And I think that was something that, I was telling you before the show, I, like a lot of folks, I didn't know a whole lot about Chavez growing up. He was one of a handful of like union leaders you might be exposed to in school, right? And we're talking maybe a paragraph in the textbook. You might see a picture of the Great Boycott, and that's about it, right? And so, he has been an inspirational figure for so many years, for so many people. But, when I got a little deeper into unions and learning working class history, labor history, I was curious. Like, so we hear about the boycott and winning legal rights in California, but you don't really hear much about the career after that. When you looked just a little bit, like if you scratched beneath the surface a little bit, you certainly saw some problematic issues. Again, to your point, Jacob, I don't know that most people suspected as much as this, but there have been reports for years on this kind of sexual misconduct. But deeper than that, we knew there were issues institutionally and around cult of personality and things like that. So, it's just really it's disturbing when you learn about someone who was supposed to be a hero and you see this other side. Doesn't take away from some of the accomplishments or the achievements of that movement. And I think, it was always a problem that we gave so much glory and credit to this one man for a movement that was so diverse and broad and big. And, I think that's just always a danger. And that's tough because we need leaders, right? We need good leaders. And so I'm not someone who thinks that, you can have a leaderless movement per se. Like, I think leaders are real and play a vital role. But the democracy is so, so important to make sure that we actually keep people accountable, that folks are not abusing power or gaining power. Because, like, I don't know about most of our listeners, but I imagine you feel likewise. Like, I don't do this stuff so that some bureaucrat can lord over me in my union. I don't want another boss, right? We already have bosses at work. We don't need bosses in our institutions. And the right wing loves to play up that trope of union boss or union bureaucrat. And we have to be real that sometimes there's elements of truth they're hitting at. Some unions are more democratic than others, and some unions have also been better at others in terms of addressing bigotry within the ranks and misconduct within the ranks. I do appreciate, Steve, you mentioned in that book, I was not aware of it. He mentioned the book Solidarity Betrayed, how unions enable sexual harassment and how they can do better. And I really, really appreciate you sharing that because I think unions are here to protect workers, right? It's the last place you would want or expect to see any kind of misconduct. Because that's why we band together in our unions, is to protect each other from this kind of crap from our bosses and management. So when it happens in our own ranks, I think it's a special kind of hurt. And, I just send my love and solidarity to all the sisters out there who have dealt with misogyny and violence and sexism from folks, including from folks who, are supposed to be on our side or are supposed to be in our movement, folks even on the left or, progressive-minded folks who maybe have good politics on certain issues, but that doesn't mean they're not a creep. And I think it sits with me, especially as a straight white guy, that I am going to blend in certain places and among certain crowds. I'm going to hear things that maybe others wouldn't. Maybe see things that others wouldn't, right, among folks who look like me. And so I take that as a real responsibility to try to call people out as appropriate or just deal with these issues. Because I think the worst thing that a lot of folks do is they just kind of hide from it. It's easier to not deal with it right? Pretend these things don't exist. But the reality is it does. There are creeps out there. There are violent people out there, abusive people out there. And we've got to make sure that we address that in our own ranks. It's not enough just to hold bosses and politicians accountable. We've got to hold ourselves accountable. And it is a heavy thing. It's a very heavy thing. And, I have seen some more reports of just other issues in the movement that women have dealt with. And it's just really disturbing because, right, you kind of expect it sometimes from bosses and politicians, powerful people, the abusive behavior is not as surprising. But when it's your own comrades, your own union siblings, really, really a deep betrayal of trust and what the movement is all supposed to be about, because we're supposed to be here for liberation and for each other's freedom and for each other's rights. So I give credit to any victim who is able to be able to tell their story, and I can understand why it's so difficult for folks to do that. But it's something that I know I have a blind spot because I am a straight white guy. I haven't dealt with many pervy guys coming after me, just to be real. But at the same time, I'm not one of those guys. So this kind of stuff doesn't really cross my mind as much as maybe it should, because I think I sometimes have a blind spot and assume the best out of people, and assume that folks, are not going to do that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's a lot to sit with. And there as one of our folks in the chat put, there's no place for it, not in this work, anywhere, not anywhere. And also Union Gus mentioned that there was a lot of co-opting of Filipino organizing under Chavez as well. And I second that as well. Again, I'm not as well read on the West Coast history of the labor movement, but from what I do know, absolutely agree with that. The Filipino workers have not been given the amount of credit that they deserve.
Yeah. I believe we've got Jared Abbott on the line now. Jared is the director for the Center for Working Class Politics. Jared, welcome back to the program. Thanks for talking to us.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks very much.
The Center for Working Class Politics, collaborating with Jacobin and Arizona State University's Center for Work and Democracy, released a new report last week titled Unions and Electoral Politics. Can union candidates make a difference? So the question in the title of the report kind of goes to, some of the answer to this problem. But the problem that you pose in the beginning of the report is that the proportionate value of union PAC dollars is decreasing. Less and less of a percentage, particularly of Democrats, of their campaign funding is coming from union PACs. Early, I think you in your graph started, I think, in the 70s or 80s or 90s, as much as 15% of all, Democratic PAC spending came from unions, and now it's much, much less. Talk to us about that trajectory and what it means and what it has meant for the labor movement's impact on electoral politics.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty stark. The percentage of PAC donations that went. I mean, the Republican side, it was always super low, and it remains super low. Not that there aren't union Republicans, there are some, obviously, and a few in Congress. But the percentage of all PAC donations coming from unions dropped from around 15%, as recently as the late 90s, to, like 3 or 4% today. And the vast majority of the reason behind that, though, is not because, union spending patterns are tricky, and that's something that we could talk about and what they choose to invest in and why, which candidates. But that said, the main reason why unions' impact as a share of overall spending has gone down is because of, things like Citizens United and other policies that just open the floodgates to individual level, donors and to all of these super PACs, so that we see not that unions have decreased their spending on candidates, but that they've been overwhelmed by spending from individuals and from all of these other, super PACs, that they don't really have nearly the proportionate influence that they used to.
That kind of goes along with some New York Times reporting that in 2024, 20% of all political spending was done by billionaires, if I'm remembering that stat. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know the exact stat, but it's a hell of a lot, and they basically have unlimited resources, whereas labor, even if they wanted to, that they wouldn't be able to, even if they doubled or tripled how much they spend on elections, that still wouldn't, put them in a position to, well, that would help a lot actually, but it wouldn't dramatically change the field, because these other folks have, unlimited resources that they could just continue to spend more and more. It's kind of crazy that the amount of money that's actually spent on campaigns, like if you're from the perspective of a billionaire, it's like it's like a really efficient investment, right? I think I read somewhere, like I don't remember which cycle, maybe 2022, that more money is spent every year on Halloween candy than on elections. So if you're these big, corporations, and you're these billionaires and soon to be trillionaires, increasing your investment in campaigns to make up for, any kind of shift that anybody on the, on the union side could muster, supposing they could do so, would be trivial. So this is a big challenge, and it's why we're sort of talking about the need for alternative means of, union influence in electoral politics.
Well, and you mentioned that, if unions doubled or tripled their political spending, maybe that would help. I don't think that you mean that as a prescription. But even if you doubled or tripled it as a percentage, that would go from 3 to 4% to, at the top end, that would be 12%, which almost takes us to, what I do not believe you would describe as a high watermark for union influence in 1990, right? And so,
they were so powerful then that they were able to ensure that NAFTA didn't get passed, right? Oh wait, no, they weren't. Oh shoot,
exactly.
So point taken.
Yeah, and so we always, I have been kind of banging the drum a little bit. I'm not aggressive about it, but I've been banging the drum about how the billionaires have basically unlimited resources, but every dollar that unions spend on politics is a dollar that does not get spent organizing or doing literally anything else. And I think that there are a lot of people that see how much money that the labor movement still invests in politics and really wonder, are we getting a return? Because we kind of have to get a return on our investment, and so are we getting that return on investment? And that's maybe an open question. But you use this to talk about alternatives to trying to build union influence electorally beyond beyond just money. And I actually think that, if you go back to when unions had more electoral influence, you look at the 40s and 50s and 60s, I think that there was probably some of what you are proposing in this report. So can you take us through what are some of the alternatives that unions could look at as far as trying to increase their influence beyond just donating more?
Yeah. So, one point there to note, based on what you were saying around union spending in elections, is that, and the benefit or lack thereof that we get, and we talk about this in the report, is that when unions do spend on elections, they overwhelmingly spend on incumbents, right? They almost never spend money on challengers, on people that are trying to challenge the status quo. And if you're a union leader, that's, I'm not trying to fault them in a sense, it's rational, right? You want to make sure that you have connections with legislators, and you want to, keep those relationships strong. And incumbents are overwhelmingly likely to win every election, right? 96% or whatever, of incumbents win their election. So, I'm not saying it's ludicrous to do that, but on the other hand, it makes it so that unions aren't playing the kind of role in this, what I think, especially in this cycle, we're seeing so many more working class candidates, that are getting attention. We're seeing so much more talk about economic populism, and unions should be the center of that, but they're not. And and that's a problem in terms of how they're spending money. But apart from that, what are some of the alternatives? We're not saying, well, the main alternative we talk about in this report is let's get more union members to run for office. That's essentially it. We're not trying to say that there aren't other mechanisms. And in fact, another really important one, which we don't talk about, but there's a great report you can find online by some folks at the Center for Work and Democracy at Arizona State, which is ballot initiatives, right? You can get ballot unions can pour way more money than they do into getting minimum wage hikes passed in red states, right? Where you could never do it through the state legislature because it's too Republican, but where taken out of the partisan context, most people would vote for, a higher minimum wage or stronger labor protections, or, you name the more progressive issue. So that's really important. And we're not trying to say that that's, not a really, really key factor. And there are others as well. But we're talking about union candidates. And what we found is when we talked with a bunch of, folks who have come out of the labor movement who have run for office and become candidates, we found that, they kind of have a unique value added in all kinds of ways in terms of being effective representatives for working people and for unions and labor in particular when they get into office. And we found that, reflected time after time in the interviews that we did. And then we also did a quantitative analysis where we went back over the past, 20-ish years, and we found all of the candidates and all of the people that were elected to Congress who had a union background of any kind. And we mean that kind of loosely, right? Like if you had ever kind of been a member of a union, or, even if you're like an honorary member, like, so it's not like these are like strict, like, been in the union, been a leader for their whole life. We're trying to think about it pretty broadly. And we found very clear evidence that people that come from unions are just more likely to advocate for working people, to advocate for progressive economics than people who don't. And the reasons are pretty obvious, right? They've been socialized to think in terms of solidarity and in terms of workers' rights. And on the other hand, they often have very strong ongoing relationships with people in the labor movement so that they catch a lot of hell if they screw up. I always give this is kind of an extreme example, but I always give the example of Evo Morales, who was once the president of Bolivia. And, they're sort of famous, at least for a time period, of being a place where, there was this kind of really balance between, the unions on the one hand and the political party on the other hand. And the unions really had a lot of influence and power. But Evo was both the president and also the leader of about 6 unions at the same time. So every month he had to go back home to, where he was from out in a different part of the country. And he had to get yelled at by all of his union brothers and sisters about stuff that he was screwing up. Like, that's the kind of idea, right? There's a connection there, which means that these candidates have both the socialization and the incentives because of their social networks and who they rely on to get reelected, because unions do support union candidates pretty strongly, and they provide not just monetary resources, but they provide lots of ground support for sure, and they provide a lot of member to member organizing around elections, which is really critical, especially in union dense places where union candidates run for office. And we found overall that if we had more union candidates that were running, we could have better tribunes for working class and union politics in office without necessarily spending much more money overall.
There's so much there to talk about. I mean, it seems really intuitive to people that are kind of in the movement, I think, and there is, I think there's a lot to say about the social circles that people are in influencing the way that they act in office, which is their job. If you are a guy that comes out of, entrepreneur spaces, even if you're, a quote unquote good Democrat and you want, kind of generally pro working class or redistributive measures, you come out of an entrepreneur social circle, you're fraternizing with business types, your level of connection and genuine interest in it is just kind of necessarily different than somebody who comes off of the shop floor or whose social circles are union members and labor leaders. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I couldn't agree more. And we posed that question to a lot of the people we interviewed about, like, okay, like we interviewed a city councilor, this great socialist city councilor in LA. His name's Hugo Soto Martinez. And he we're like, the whole city council in LA is like, well, not the whole, but so many of them are like progressive Democrats, right? And I was like, so why does it matter if you're a union guy? And he said, well, it matters a lot because everybody in a place like LA is very progressive. Everybody's going to tick the boxes saying that they support X, Y, and Z things, but he's the one, as the union guy, who gets asked to talk about these issues. He's the one that has the ability to talk about them in organic ways that are really compelling. And also he's the one who at the end of the day is going to prioritize, among a list of many, many issues that are all important. He's the one that's going to prioritize the union working class issues over other issues because that's where he comes from. That's his background. And so people said that again and again, that being a good Democrat and having, you can have the exact same score on AFL-CIO, right?
Right.
But the union Democrat is still going to be a stronger one for working people than their comrades. Not always, of course. And on the other hand, Ronald Reagan was a union leader, right? Does that make him a great president?
Right.
Obviously not. So we're not trying to say that this is a universal, factor, but in general, we find that, when folks come from a union background and they have that experience, it's more likely to make them stronger advocates for working class and union communities.
It is a big old bummer that the only two union members to have been presidents were both Republicans, Reagan and Trump. Just real big bummer. But I think that the analysis still stands. I mean, those just happen to be two very big outliers. Did your report go into at all any of the any sort of electability analysis? A union member compared to a non-union member, all else equal, are people generally, you do say in your report, union members are significantly more likely to vote for a fellow union member over a non-union member, all else equal. But what about the population generally? Are union members themselves, all else equal, more electable?
So the problem with answering that question and why we didn't focus on it in the report is that there just aren't enough of them that have run to allow us to do, like a rigorous quantitative analysis, because actually figuring out what is the effect of having a union background is pretty difficult, because there's so many other things that also matter. And so the best way that I could respond to that is in other research that we've done and that I've done with my colleague Fred DeVoe. We've done that kind of analysis for working class candidates, those with a working class background, of which a vast majority of union candidates are also working class background, although not all of them. And what we found there is that in general elections, union candidates are working class candidates are no more or less likely to win elections than anybody else in general, even though they also have serious disadvantages compared to other types of candidates. Like they tend to have, lower fundraising capacity. They tend to have, their social networks are more limited in terms of, getting endorsements from important, people in the community and in the country, et cetera, but they still do just as well. And really crucially, we find that among working class voters, working class candidates perform substantially better. And that's the message that I think Democrats in swing states and Democrats in heavily working class districts and states need to hear, is that when you are in a place, like think about a Dan Osborne in Nebraska, right? Working class union guy. He's in a state that's overwhelmingly non-college educated working class. And in a state like that, he's going to do better than somebody who's just like him, except they don't have, in terms of policies, but they don't have the working class background. So in short, we can't really answer that exactly for union members, but we can answer it for working class candidates who are very highly correlated with union candidates. And we find that if you want to get more working class support, you should have more working class candidates. And I think the same applies with union candidates.
The Center for Working Class Politics, your definition of working class kind of ties in income and occupation. It's not a strictly kind of Marxist definition of working class, i.e., do you work for your money or do you own for your money? Like, I don't think that you would count in your analysis an NBA player as working class. It's a little bit, kind of measuring the cultural affectation as well. If you could give us exactly how is it that y'all define working class, and then further, it's the position of the Center for Working Class Politics that Democrats do need to focus on winning majorities and ideally big majorities of the working class as so defined, rather than kind of adventuring into getting, losing blue collar workers and picking up suburban moms, right?
For sure. I mean, if you just want to get a basic sense of it, it's that now very infamous Chuck Schumer quote, right? That for every working class person that we lose in Beaver County or in post-industrial Western PA, we're going to pick up 3 in Bucks County or in the Philly suburbs. Like that is the opposite of what we believe. And when it comes to how do we define working class? I don't have any kind of like religious faith in one definition or anything like that. I think we just kind of have different, we use income and education as reasonable proxies. We use, occupational categories. Every survey we do, we ask people what their job title is, what industry they're in, and we match that with, like thousands of census codes. And then we can basically, aggregate that in different ways. And, there's not a clean version of this, right? What you think of the working class is inherently going to be a political question, right? And you're going to have a certain perspective on that based on your idea of working class strategy. But basically, yeah, that's what we tend to go with. Is we have income and education, because many surveys that's all that they ask about. But where possible, we try to use occupation so that we can see gradations across different sectors in the labor force. And yeah, we don't use the strict Marxist definition because we don't think that that's particularly discriminating in terms of understanding the work life of different people and how that may affect the way that they vote. Not to say that there aren't positives of doing that, but we think analytically that doesn't really get at some of the key sort of tensions and cleavages in American politics. So in short, working class candidates or working class voters are so important because they're the ones that have the material interest in the things that we as, progressives and socialists or and union people that we all want to see. And we cannot rely, even if it were possible, which it's not because the population is too small in many swing states, we cannot rely on an increasing share of, professional, managerial, and, upper middle income people to make up for the progressive losses that we're getting from, workers going to the Republicans. The math just isn't there. But even if it were closer, we would still have the problem that materially working class people are the ones that are going to benefit from these sorts of policies, and they're the ones that are going to fight for them, and we need them at the core of our constituency. So we don't need just a majority of working class voters. If we want to actually have the society that we want, the one where working people really come first, we need an overwhelming majority so that we can do the things in Congress that haven't been feasible since the New Deal, and that we're a long way from that. And we think that the union candidate focus is one small but important piece of that larger puzzle.
Why do you think it is that the Democrats were so willing to move away from fighting for supermajorities of working class people, even though the Democrats as an institution were by far the largest beneficiaries of supermajorities of working class support in this country's history? There's never been a more kind of definitionally working class supermajority than the New Deal coalition, and it has always, as somebody who's kind of been paying attention to politics for the last 10 years, it's kind of flummoxed me the willingness with which so many Democrats threw that away.
Yeah, that's a long and complex history, and you can have 20 different people on to talk about that. Who have really interesting, variants of the story. But my sort of basic take on it is that it was just kind of, there's a lot of different aspects of this, but I think a crucial part of it is that Democrats just convinced themselves that they needed to moderate on many issues because they sort of bought into this increasingly consensus idea that the tax and spend period of the New Deal and all the inflation from the 70s, that we just had to have an alternative, and the Democrats needed a new brand, and they increasingly focused on what was the third way, which eventually became Bill Clinton, and that's what we were basically stuck with, more or less up until I would say, the Biden administration, who in important ways, moved away from that. Not enough by far, but still in important ways in terms of talking about industrial policy and putting workers first, at least in certain ways. And so I think it was a matter of just short-term tactical thinking that we know if we just do some kind of political triangulation in the short term, we might be able to, like in, let's say, 1992, or after they had the historic defeat, disastrous defeat in 1988, with a more liberal nominee. Then Clinton comes in and he says, look, we're not trying to get 65%, 60%. We just need to win. And, they started to think in terms of short-term tactical coalitions. And that's where they've been, with the exception of, Obama's first term, that's essentially where they've been ever since. And the risk of putting their faith in a longer term realignment strategy to build a future for working class people that has an expansive progressive economic populist element, they're so afraid that that's going to make them lose elections in the short term that they just keep over and over again just going back to the center. And we see this already with, all of these like third way reports that you might have been reading about, or these different postmortems of the 2024 election saying, all we need to do is talk a little bit more about, in a folksy style, and we need to moderate on some hot button cultural issues, and then we're going to pick off a few of these independents, and then we're going to be good. It's like, well, you might win an election doing that in this year, but the fact that you kept doing that in the 90s and 2000s and didn't offer a real alternative, that to me is the principal reason why Trump became the president of the United States. And do you want to keep making that mistake over and over again? I hope not.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that there has been, there's been so much kind of ping-ponging back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, and ultimately neither party has, in a way that, the Reagan coalition or the New Deal coalition really fundamentally changed the structure of American society. Neither coalition has done that, and there's not been very much interest in doing that, particularly on behalf of working people. We could argue that potentially Trump's second term is embarking on a project that would do that. But you mentioned Third Way. They've got a memo out based on their polling where they try to make the case that fighting against the rich is not all it's cracked up to be, and that rather, you should focus on fighting for affordable health care or this or that or the other thing, rather than naming and blaming class enemies. But you don't share that perspective. You think that having an enemy is actually a pretty important piece of the puzzle to a supermajority politics.
I do. And I think that it's not, there is one wrinkle here which I think is valid, which is that I don't think a lot of working class people, and people in my own family that I know, I could hear them saying this. I have heard them say this. Like, they don't necessarily hate like people for being billionaires per se. Like, they want to, like, if they got rich, they'd be happy. And, they want to have more stuff. And like, they're not like against capitalism per se, or, even against billionaires. So there is a way in which you need to be careful how you talk about billionaires. But what they don't want and what they really hate is that these billionaires are rigging the system against them, and that they are benefiting at the expense of everybody else. And so that is fundamental, that distinction between, why are we all suffering and who is to blame for this and how are they benefiting while we're not? Our research has shown that is a much more powerful framing than either, like sort of what Harris tried to do in 2024, which was like, there's a few bad guys out there, but basically corporations are fine, whatever. Or even more away from our perspective being like the third way that you mentioned of let's just fight for and not against. Do we need to fight for as well? Absolutely. These are two sides of the same political strategy. But without making people see that we feel their pain and that we understand how pissed off and dejected they are about how American politics has just left them behind. And it's not just the billionaires, it's also the politicians, right? And I think people on the left are too focused on the economic villains who are critical, obviously, fundamental. But the politicians are, they're the ones that are making all this happen too. And working class people are just as pissed off, if not more, about corruption in Washington as they are about the billionaires. So you need to have both of those villains. But to say that you shouldn't attack villains, I mean, I'm sure that they have some polling that shows that there's certain frames, that work in that way and this way. And I'm not saying they're lying about anything in any way, but our research doesn't point in that direction, with the slight wrinkle that I said you don't want to necessarily vilify people just for being rich, because I don't think that a lot of working class people relate to that in particular. But do you want to vilify them for screwing you over and rigging a system so that they can't have the quality of life that their parents and grandparents had, and that they don't know what their kids' future is going to be like because we're handing this country over to these tech trillionaires and AI? Yes, that pisses them off. And if we don't talk about that, we're in big trouble.
One thing that one of your colleagues at the Center for Working Class Politics mentioned in a response to this memo was that that question in particular pitted the two against each other, as if you can't fight against billionaires and for affordable health care at the same time, which I thought was a pretty funny kind of false dichotomy, and actually I'm not aware of any candidate or politician or media figure who everything that they do is, I hate billionaires. I'm going to tax billionaires into oblivion. No more billionaires. Nothing else. And that's all. Nobody does. Like, that's not a thing that anybody does. They say, I'm going to tax billionaires. Maybe they'll say billionaires shouldn't exist. Billionaires are a policy failure. But because I want to make better things for working class people, and the fact that we have billionaires is an impediment to that, and so we got to get rid of them specifically for the good things, and so it was a pretty funny attempt to create this false dichotomy, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree.
All right, well, we've been talking about the value of having an enemy, the value of working class candidates and union candidates in particular. You talk about how union experience makes candidates and elected officials more effective legislative strategists, better coalition builders. You talk about how union members shift the agenda toward labor. We've been you talked a little bit about how in LA, maybe the voting record is going to be the same, but who is going to be the person that puts the pro-worker thing on the agenda? It's going to be more likely, a union member is more likely to have the initiative to go and do that. It makes them more focused on labor issues, all of this. And so lots of really good stuff from being a union member, and then more generally having a working class background. But, you said that one of the reasons that it's difficult to answer the question of electability of union members is because there are just so few union members out there that are running for office. Why is that the case, and how can we fix that?
It's the case because of recruitment issues. That there's, when people go to find candidates, they are often just looking for people in their networks, right? And political strategists that are trying to recruit candidates. They're probably not, in general, super likely to go have a beer with their union brothers and sisters down at the bar, right? Those are not the people that they're hanging out with. Those are not the people that are in their circles. And so they just don't think about recruiting those sorts of folks. And so who would think about recruiting them? Well, unions. Do unions recruit union people? Well, yes, some of them do. And we talked with some folks from numerous states that are really focused on union recruitment of union candidates, and they run pretty effective union and working class candidate training programs, and they've had some real results. The most impressive one is New Jersey, where they've run a union candidate training school for, I don't know the exact number of years, but 20 some years. And they've literally gotten hundreds of union people elected to office, and they start them at the city council level or the borough level or whatever, and then a lot of those guys work their way up to the state house, and then in limited cases they've also had folks that made it to the House of Representatives, and we see something similar to that in Maine, where they have a pretty strong union candidate training program, and we now see the gubernatorial candidate is himself a union guy, Troy Jackson, right? He's a really impressive candidate, union member, and union activist. And so there are examples like that of unions doing a pretty good job of trying to find, conscientiously recruit more union people. But when you talk with the AFL-CIO folks that sort of try to coordinate some of these efforts at the national level, they say perfectly reasonably, we have kind of bigger fish to fry. Basically, we want that too, but we need to focus on winning elections, and the stakes are very, very high, and oftentimes union candidates don't have the kinds of they just can't fundraise in the same way that other candidates can, and we just can't take a risk on candidates that can't that can't self finance. And so on the one hand, I think that's understandable, because they're just trying to keep their heads above water and stop things from happening that are even worse than that are currently happening. But on the other hand, it's not showing a lot of vision, right? And we had one former representative, Andy Levin from Michigan, House member, who said something along the lines of like, if they just spent like 3% of or 5% of the money that unions spend on elections right now, investing in more union candidates, the returns on that could be fantastic. Mm-hmm. And maybe I don't know what but they're not doing that. And so I think that's what we hope that we can get out of this is more attention paid to the need to divert some resources to more conscientious candidate recruitment, so that across all 50 states we have union candidate training programs, and especially in those places where Democrats really face uphill battles in elections, those are the places where union candidates are going to be the most important, because they have such strong ties to communities and they're seen as such organic and authentic candidates in general. And so we're going to be hosting an event soon with some of the people that were involved in the report, with union members and people from state feds coming on talking about their experiences, and just to sort of spread the word about this and hope that we can move the needle a little bit in the years ahead.
Jared Abbott works for the Center for Working Class Politics. He is the director. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave us with before we let you go?
And I think you've heard my weird hoarse voice enough, and I really appreciate you the invitation. And I also really enjoyed listening to your previous conversation. That was really, really well said. Thanks again.
Really appreciate your time and look forward to having you back on.
All right, take it easy. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye. All right.
Yeah, definitely encourage folks to check out that report, and I would love to see union candidate training programs in all 50 states. Wow.
You know what? There is a union member that's running for office that we know. You remember Bo Hawk?
Yeah.
He's running for mayor of Knox County.
That's great.
And he's already got the endorsement of the Central Labor Council and the building trades, as well as a couple of other unions he only endorsed 2 weeks ago. And I went and looked up the last election. That's where Kane is the mayor currently.
The wrestler?
The wrestler, yeah.
Okay.
So he's term limited out. So it's now open. So he's running against a non-incumbent Republican. He's running as a Democrat. And Kane only won his election by 10 points, 55-45. And so, I think that the election is in August. So it's a special election in a midterm year, so going to be low turnout. It's generally a very, very bad year for Republicans. I think the average swing in all these special elections has so far been like 10 points. Taylor Remmett, the union member who won a state Senate district in Texas, swung it by 30 points. Won the district by 14 points that Trump had won only 12 months ago by 17 points. And so I think that Bo is really well positioned to become the mayor of Knox County in August. So I mean, it's super excited. We're obviously going to have him on the show at some point. Somebody did ask him. There was a TikTok person who who was like at one of his rallies or something and asked him if he's going to take APAC money, which I don't know why APAC would get involved in the Knox County mayor race, but nevertheless he said no, he would not take APAC money. So yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for this campaign, and I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win.
Yeah, and that also speaks to running for local offices, because I think that is a great way for folks to get started. I have run into a lot of folks over the last 15 years or so I've been in politics who decide on a whim, sometimes after a lot of like deep thought and prayer, but sometimes on a whim. People are like, oh, I want to get involved. Things need to change. I'm going to run for office now. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, what are you going to run for? Congress, governor, that's how you're starting. You're going to start. I mean, I'm not opposed to it if you can do it, but there is something to be said for kind of working your way up and building your resume, building your credentials and experience and relationships. Mm-hmm. And just on a practical matter, it's probably going to be easier to win a city council or a county commission or school board race on a off year or in a off month where you're going to have 10-20% turnout. Right? A 10-20% turnout election, a very motivated group of volunteers can make a hell of an impact. We have seen in Huntsville city politics, Huntsville is now the biggest city in the state of Alabama. And over the last, 10-15 years, I've been tracking politics in Huntsville. There have been quite a few instances of, grassroots candidates, more populist candidates upsetting the establishment. And, despite being outspent, despite, all the, official organizations and PACs and all that being lined up against them, it's been possible. And it's because, again, it's low turnout. And if you can get a clear message out there, and that folks who are motivated for change are going to show up, oftentimes they're going to show up more than folks who are motivated to keep the status quo, right? And that's something I actually told a potential candidate in the last week. The reality is, in a low turnout local election, the turnout of your base is so critical. And theoretically, you would imagine most times people who want change are more motivated to go vote than people who are just motivated to keep it the same. Mm-hmm. And so now that doesn't necessarily track with incumbent success rates, right? Incumbents are very successful, as Jared pointed out, but there's potential there. So I would encourage more unions to be involved in local politics and state level politics, to be involved in directly training candidates, recruiting candidates. We need folks from our movement out there on these in these races, local especially, but anywhere we can contest. I think that's important, and it's good experience. And I think that, so some of the points y'all made in the conversation earlier, labor movement folks are going to come at it with a different network, a different perspective than the typical businessman or lawyer for businessman. Because that's pretty much, at least, down south, a lot of times that's our choice. Do you want the lawyer or the business guy? And they work with each other, but do you want one of those two, basically? Every now and then you might get a cop.
Yep.
That's about the diversity of it. So authentic working class candidates, I think, go a long way. I'm glad to see more working class candidates on the ballot in Alabama in 2026. It looks like there are more choices. I mean, there's more choices, period. There's more candidates on the ballot than there has been in some time. But, I've encountered more than one candidate who is just a legit working class person, and is not, trying to get rich, not trying to be corrupt or anything like that. They're just a regular person who wants to make things better and represent their community. So, I think it's true that, conventional wisdom is like, if you can't raise money, you shouldn't run for office. But if you have a base, if you have a community, I think that is a potential. And so, I think there's always potential. Steve mentions in the chat, military folks running. Yeah, there's lots of that, especially like I've noticed the trend of like CIA folks.
Yeah.
It's a little scary.
Lots of CIA people, lots of CIA Democrats.
Right. There's a difference between just a veteran.
Right. Yeah.
And a
rank and file
retired CIA. Rank and file veterans, good for them. And in fact, I met with a candidate in Alabama not too long ago who is a veteran. And we had a great conversation about the VA and, trying to defend the VA against privatization. So that, great opening, great conversation, very pro working class person. But yeah, the trend of these national security types getting into office is very concerning. Like you were saying, Jacob, if Democrats want to just look at when were we most successful as a party, well, it's obvious it was the New Deal era.
Right.
And there's obviously vested interest against keeping that from returning.
Yeah.
A lot of politicians are more interested in their donors than they are their constituents, regardless of what party they're in. So that's always something we've got to deal with. But it helps when it's people from the unions that we have relationships with that we can help hold accountable, because if they do cross us, right, it's a little bit easier to deal with it.
Yeah.
I'm appreciating the report, and I really do hope that folks from the AFL-CIO and the big wigs in the union movement are reading this stuff and listening to this, because that is an opportunity, right? You could have taken just a thimbleful of what was given in the 2024 elections to set up these programs, these candidate training programs, and it would have a multiplier effect.
Right.
And you have to have some kind of like long-term strategy beyond just cycle to cycle. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do the regular thing. If you feel it's important to back the incumbent and keep the relationship, I understand on a practical level how that may make sense sometimes, but yeah, we've got to be putting in the work to build long-term power and to get more folks like us in office, because I'm sorry, I'm not interested in more elites, no matter what color the party, no matter like what team they're claiming, even if they say a lot of the right things. Honestly, you ain't like us,
right?
I'm sorry if you're some millionaire, billionaire, or lawyer or crony of a millionaire, billionaire. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a labor lawyer, that's different.
Yeah.
If you fight for the people, that's different.
Yeah.
If your career is fighting for the people, and that is something I think that is an advantage for union candidates, because they have literally volunteered their time to help their comrades, to help their brothers and sisters on the job.
Right.
Whereas, frankly, you look at a lot of these candidates, and when they talk about their background, it's usually some kind of entrepreneurial stuff like, oh, let me tell you about this product I created, or this company I started,
right,
or this big title I held, and I want to know that you're about the people, you're listening to people, because I try not to be a Puritan on electoral politics. You're never going to get exactly what you want out of that, but if the candidate is willing to listen and can be persuaded, can be pressured to do the right thing, that's what I look for. And it's going to be easier with union candidates, to find someone who can listen and who can be pressured to do the right thing. And even with those folks, you're going to have to pressure them to do the right thing sometimes. There's a lot of... I run into a lot of like progressives and liberals who are theoretically pro-labor, pro-union. They will say some of the right things, but they're not willing to really hold people in their party accountable. Like everything's always the Republicans' fault. And sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes it's both parties' fault, right? Or sometimes it's the other party's fault, right? You have to be willing to be honest about stuff like that. And I've seen that in Alabama politics with the legislature. Like, let's not be naive and pretend that Alabama Power only has influence with the Republican Party. Come on now.
Yeah, right.
You know, and that's just one example. But yeah, loving this stuff coming out of the Center for Working Class Politics. They've put out some really great reports over the last year or two.
Yeah.
You know, I really enjoyed the one about independent candidates. And I know the conversation we had with Jared this morning was mostly on Democrats, but there's a lot of potential for independent candidates, in my opinion, especially areas here in the South where the Democrats have pretty much given up anyway. Or even if they haven't given up, they're not really doing much effectively. I think there's real potential with that, and I hope to see more people run as independent candidates. I know ballot access is really tough, but if you can build your base enough to get on the ballot, you have the potential to really do something.
Steve in the chat said, I've been sitting with the Atlanta Labor Council interviewing candidates who want laborers' endorsement. Sean Harris, who is running for Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat, was a lieutenant colonel. Another running for Congress was a Navy pilot. Met one running for local office, presumably who was Secret Service. Free American in the chat says, nothing is too good for the troops, and that is what they will get, nothing. Steve does say that we've interviewed some union members this week who are running for office, though. That's great, really.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Absolutely.
We do have a caller on the line from a 617 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 617 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is John Murphy. I'm a city letter carrier out of Naples, Florida.
Hey, John from Florida. Yeah, what's on your mind?
I'm just calling in to give a shout out to all the postal workers across the country. The other day, the Postmaster Steiner was down in Congress, and it was very doom and gloom. The mail handlers and the city carrier craft are currently on contract negotiations separately, and they're probably going to most likely go to interest arbitration. And the post office is talking about, you see in the news headlines that they're broke, and then also that Amazon's going to pull out of the postal service. So you go to any postal worker across the country, it's all doom and gloom. And not to mention that we just started a war, and the economy is probably on the brink of a recession or a depression, depending on what you view it as. So there's a lot of anxiety and depression, negative vibes going around. And as Joe Hill, the IWW leader, said back in the day, don't mourn, organize. So the Next Generation Carriers podcast, I'm a co-host of, we put out the demand that we start rallying, and we held an organizing meeting last Sunday, March 15th, and as a collective of over 100 postal workers from clerks, mail handlers, and city carriers and rural carriers, we voted to do informational picket lines on May 23rd, Saturday, which is day one of city carriers working under an expired contract. And people are like, well, why does that have to go across crafts? And to everyone that doesn't realize, whatever the city carriers get pretty much ends up what the APWU labor union gets. And then that trickles down over to the rural carriers and the mail handlers. We're all fighting for crumbs. So we need to come together as one, as a postal workforce. And we need to address management, right? USPS is not broke. It's just simply mismanaged. I called last week or 2 weeks ago and talked about this. And one of the examples is they're saying USPS is broke by $9 billion, but they paid out $600 million in double time. That is straight mismanagement. And that's just one example. So if there's any postal worker that wants to get involved and wants to start fighting for a good postal service, good careers again, and to sustain our retirement benefits, go to nextgenerationcarriers.com/saveUSPS. We have an organizing meeting number 2 coming up on March 29th at 11 a.m. East Coast time. And the NALC business agent, Eddie Davidson, who represents Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, is coming on to answer questions, the legality of, can we even picket the post office, right? Some people are talking about like, oh, that might be the Hatch Act, which is not the Hatch Act. Some people are just afraid to take on their bosses. So this is the time where we need to get back out into the public, because during COVID, the public loved us. But since the COVID, since 2020, our quality of service has gone down because under DeJoy, former Postmaster DeJoy has just ruined standards. So we need not only our customers to be involved, but we need to rally and show the politicians that hey, don't listen to the billionaires rhetoric. Like this, listen to the workers. We're your voting bloc. So any postal worker out there, if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling alone, join us. And I'm calling. I left a voicemail earlier. Sorry about that. I'm calling because there was a worker I talked to yesterday out in Austin, Texas. She's pretty much brand new. She's in her 20s. She's very new to the unions, and she went to her union meeting just this past Wednesday, and they brought a motion to the floor to adopt, for their NALC branch to adopt May 23rd as a day of action. And they thought there was going to be a lot of opposition from the retirees and the union bureaucracy of the branch, but they were welcomed with open arms, because even the retirees say, like, whatever happens to the United States Postal Service is going to trickle down to the retirees' retirement benefits. So we need to come together. And like this worker, she was brand new in her 20s, and she felt ecstatic, right? She went from mourning and depressing attitude to let's organize. And now she's reaching out to people in California and other states that she knows of to help mobilize us. So anyone that is listening, please feel empowered if you're a postal worker to join us. Go to nextgenerationcarriers.com/save USPS. Throw in your information and we'll throw you in the Zoom and we'll be in contact with you.
All right. Appreciate the call, John. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate the call and appreciate the organizing happening there. Definitely encourage all postal service workers, no matter what craft or union, to get involved because, yeah, the news coming out of the Postal Service over the last week or two, very concerning. It's clear that, the privatization playbook is being used here. Sabotage the public institution and strip it for parts and try to privatize it by piece, or sometimes outright just sell the whole damn thing. Whatever is on deck, it's clear that they've been trying to sabotage this postal service. It's clear it's been mismanaged. When you're paying out, exorbitant amounts of money in grievances because you can't even follow your own damn contract.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. And then you're going to go and tell the American public we're going broke. We may have to stop your deliveries. We may have to impact your services even more than they've already been impacted. Because let me tell you, you ever go to any local Facebook community, like local Facebook group about your particular town or city, like half the posts are people griping about the mail. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. This is such a widespread thing that everyone in the community, if someone hasn't been directly impacted by mail issues, someone who has.
Right.
And that's becoming more and more widespread, which is by design, and it gets more people primed to accept some sort of destruction or privatization of the service. So I commend John and all the letter carriers and other postal service workers out there who are organizing, who are trying to get this in the public and are trying to build alliances across different job categories. Absolutely. I mean, it seems to me the Postal Service is getting to a point of existential crisis, and it's going to take a lot of collective action to really overcome that. And the last thing I'll say is I appreciated what John was saying in terms of the bad vibes and the anxiety and depression that's going around right now. I do think that organizing is a great antidote to that. If you're feeling hopeless, if you're feeling beat down, or just feeling like, really shook by the state of the world, showing up for each other and pushing back and finding the ways that you can make some kind of positive change where you're at really does make a difference. It lifts your spirits. It helps lift other people's spirits. It helps give you the energy to keep going. And so I would really encourage that. Times are really tough. We're in a very strange and unique and disturbing time in history right now, that we're living through. And coming together with your brothers and sisters of the working class is the best thing you can do to stay strong and deal with this. Because I know it's been really tough for me lately just to see what's going on with the war, to see the fact that we're starving Cuba. Like, how does killing dialysis patients in Cuba make America great? How does that make my community better? Me paying for this with my tax dollars going to blow up children. I don't see how that makes America great. I think we're at a real tipping point in terms of this country's imperial overreach, and as John mentioned, it's also impacting the economy. Economy doesn't look great at all, and so I fear that things are going to keep getting worse before they get better. But it's going to be up to us as everyday people to keep organizing and building power. Because things have been bad before, things have also gotten better before. And the only way they've ever gotten better was through the people power, through collective organization and collective action.
Yep. Won't spend too long on it, but wanted to get to this. Nearly 4,000 Colorado workers who work at the world's largest meatpacking company, JBS, and who at that one facility in Greeley, Colorado, process 5% of all U.S. beef, just went on strike for the first time ever. That facility has never had a strike. Those workers are unionized with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 7. They say that they're striking over insulting wage proposals and working conditions from the company. The company is only offering a 2% annual wage increase, but is coupling that with increases to health insurance costs and maintaining a policy that requires workers to buy their own PPE, personal protective equipment, which in some cases can cost as much as $1,100.
And very important in the kind of work they're doing.
Yes.
And it's just such dangerous work that they do. Really.
It's super dangerous work. It's known as a really difficult job, a really low-paying job, and the Trump administration is not helping things. They just last month eliminated line speed caps on processing facilities, allowing processing facilities to basically push the lines, speed up the lines as much as they want, which is crazy, which increases the importance of local contract negotiations over these types of issues. There have been some moves forward. Last year, the UFCW was able to secure for the first time in 40 years a defined benefit pension plan for JBS workers nationwide. We talked to one of the people on the bargaining committee with the UFCW about that big win. And that includes this plant, but workers are saying that's not enough. 99% of Local 7 members voted to authorize a strike. I mean, that is really, really big. This comes as beef prices are, through the roof. It's just crazy. I mean, literally 3 times the cost of, ground beef costs 3 times the cost of ground turkey. And I only know that because I was making spaghetti a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I haven't had red meat in my spaghetti in a while. I usually do the ground turkey just kind of for the health stuff of it. And so I went to buy the ground beef just to, spruce up my spaghetti a little bit. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. That's so expensive. So I put ground turkey in my spaghetti.
Well, and also, just think about this as a consumer. They are speeding up the lines while cutting oversight and regulations.
Yep.
Now, I mean, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair was kind of a big deal in this country, and really brought light to issues that helped get for real regulations in the economy in a way that we hadn't seen much before. And it's yet another shocking, but, sadly, maybe not surprising example of us returning to the Gilded Age.
Yeah. Jacobin has a really good article about this by Alex Press. Great labor reporter. You should read it. The article is titled "Thousands of Colorado Meatpacking Workers Are on Strike." And so she goes into some of the context on this. Also mentions that More Perfect Union has done some reporting on this about how JBS has had lots of allegations of doing, child labor, stealing money, doing deceptive recruitment practices in other countries. At this one plant, Alex said that the estimate is that 57 languages are spoken in this one plant. Really, really, that's fascinating stuff. And that is part of the meat meatpacking industries move away from union strongholds and to less union dense environments like places like Colorado or in the South, and relying heavily on vulnerable populations like immigrants, because if an immigrant steps out of line or they're a little bit too uppity, you can basically kick them out of the country with the way that our visas work. It's totally an unfair situation. One Government Accountability Office report found that injury and illness rate in meat and poultry plants consistently exceed the average for U.S. manufacturing. So lots of problems still going on in this industry, and it's by design. The industry is trying to do everything that they can to keep their costs as low as possible, increase the prices as much as possible. And so we'll see, what these workers are able to do and potentially what impact this is going to have on the beef market in the United States. If they're able to shut down the plant, one plant that produces 5% of all U.S. beef, only a couple of weeks after that Lexington, Kansas, plant was closed by Tyson, which also produced 5% of all U.S. beef. That's 10% of U.S. beef being taken off the market in 4 weeks. I don't see how that doesn't have an impact on the market, although the Trump administration, in addition to doing all of this, is increasing beef imports from Argentina, which, increases competition among the workers, not among the providers, because it's Tyson and JBS that are producing the beef in Argentina and bringing it to the United States. And so it's going to have the impact of pushing wages lower in the United States. And so lots of bad stuff. But I wanted to let y'all know about that in case you hadn't heard about it. You should check out the reporting in Jacobin by Alex Press and on More Perfect Union's Twitter page. Really exciting stuff today. We do have another caller on the line. Let's bring them on the air from a 256 area code. Believe I know who this is. Dwayne, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Well, hey, Jacob. Hey, Adam. I really want to reemphasize and say it where everyone can get it, what can be done about the hospital merger, okay? And Adam, I know you like to look these things up, and if you'll look it up, you could even say this every week if you felt like it, okay? It's called the Hart-Scott-Rodino, R-O-D-I-N-O, HSR Antitrust Improvements Act of 1976. And listen, anybody that doesn't like it, that it's a monopoly or that you're in a 50-mile radius and now you won't have any choices, anybody whose jobs or services that have to do with these hospitals are affected, it only takes a few minutes, and it's on ftc.gov. Comment on proposed merger, file an antitrust complaint, and it only takes a couple of minutes. And another place that you can go to also do the same type thing is called healthycompetition.gov. So I want to make everyone aware of that. The more persons that can say there are problems with monopolies, like the nurses that you had on the show that said how they would be affected, the more persons that can go, this can make a difference. And it is the Federal Trade Commission, but unlike where it might just be our current way of administrative things that are going on, preventing us from having a voice, there is a potential for actual voice because of the way that the Hart-Scott-Rodino Act is set up, guys. And I really want to make that clear that it's something that we can do and take action. And it's a 30-day window that we can do right now and during that 30 days. Once the 30 days is up, we don't have a voice anymore.
Thanks for the call, Dwayne. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I've got that website, and I will be letting some folks know about that. And I know my understanding is the merger is going to be going through end of March, early April. So there's still a few days, or still about 9-10 days or so for those who want to share some concerns or questions or anything that you have, any thoughts that you may have around that. And just stay tuned. I expect there's going to be some more some more information coming out. The North Alabama Area Labor Council did work with United Women of Color and some other community folks on a listening session a couple of weeks ago. And there's going to be a report, is my understanding, coming out very soon about that before this month is over. So yeah, but appreciate the call, Dwayne, and hope you got to check out the Senator Stutts interview.
Yeah. All right, I believe that's it. You got anything else, Adam?
Just, as always, go to labornotes.org/events and see what they got on deck for training. I know they've got some stewards workshops. This one should be good next month. Dealing with difficult supervisors. Now, that seems like a very helpful class. I could have used that at various points in my life. They also have Winning a Strong Contract, parts 1 and 2. And yeah, of course, the Labor Notes Conference is June of this summer, and it's general registration has closed, but you can get on the wait list if you'd like.
All right. We'll see y'all next week.